Hi, everyone. Our guest today is Aimee Cabo Nikolov. She has been through what the Miami media has called hell. In fact, her case regarding childhood sexual abuse was called the case from hell. She talks about that on our show today and where she is today, why she does a radio show, why she does a podcast, why she's authored a book and does many speaking engagements trying to help as many people get to a place of peace that she has been able to after what she's been through. So please welcome Aimee Cabo on the show.
I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristen Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show? After several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Aimee, thank you so much for first coming on this network and then for coming on my show.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about why you went the podcasting route.
Well, it's really a radio show that turns into a podcast.
Okay, gotcha.
And it really started when I wrote my memoir. I did not realize how many people that I was helping just by telling my story, just by telling my truth. And I saw that people were really moved and that my past wasn't in vain because it helped me to become more understanding and I could see where people are coming from and things like that. So it started out with a couple of interviews. And then one day I interviewed with a radio host about 2 times. On the 3rd time, he didn't come. And my husband, my co-host, he said, "Oh, he's not here. We're on in a few minutes on air. It's us." And I was just kind of thrown into it like that. And afterwards I said, "Wow, this is kind of crazy. I don't know anything about this." And he said, "Well, if you don't like it, we can just try it for a month. If you don't like it, stop."
Right.
So it's been a year and
Yeah.
it's been good because I feel very good about the fact that I may be helping others, even if it's just one person that needed to hear what I had to say or needed to hear what my guest had to say or learn something from one of the experts in the field. I believe everyone suffers from something or has suffered from something. And I just want to find different ways that we can help each other.
Absolutely. So, Aimee, the show is called The Cure. And, I know, you started out in radio and it's funny because I started out in doing, I started out in podcasting and then I've done tons of radio too, but I had that same trial by fire. Just here you go, figure it out. And that
how to swim.
Exactly. That nervousness that comes from, I've got to figure this out. I'm on the air. Some people don't like that at all. I happen to love it. So sounds like you do too. So in terms of your story and what got you to the place to, wanting to share, because, you're not talking about needlepoint here. You're talking about, some pretty serious issues that people have. Can you share a little bit about, your story with my listeners so they can get to know you and why this became so important?
Sure. My story started out rough. When I was 3 years old, my stepfather came into my life, and my parents were doctors. We were 9 kids. And we're around at the time that I was 7 years old, it was evident that my stepfather was sexually abusing me significantly. And he admitted at that point, he said he was sorry, he'd get some help. My mother kicked him out, but he was back the next 2 days. And the sexual abuse progressed on a daily basis until I was about 15 years old. But I knew never to say anything again because, of course, a child blames themselves.
Right.
And I was the reason why everyone was crying and they were missing their dad. And I caused all these problems. So basically, when I was 15, I had gotten to a point, he had already divergenized me at 12. At 14, he was sodomizing me. And finally, at 15, I came out and I told the truth to my sister. And from then on, the case from hell began. It was a high profile case because the 2 parents were doctors and it was 9 kids.
Wow.
But that wasn't enough. I went through some foster homes and I got raped. And then when I escaped that, I ended up in a abusive relationship with a man that would beat me. And I went through domestic violence. And I escaped that because he caused the first miscarriage. And now that I was pregnant, I didn't find excuses. My motherly instinct was stronger. But when that child turned a year old, then this same man took me to court 3 to 4 times a year. And that would last for about 14 years, exactly 14 years, because then she was able to speak up for herself.
He was taking you to court for custody?
Yes. And so then what happened is that I was dealing with depression, and who knows whether the depression was from the past or whether it was situational from the custody battles, but that depression led to some drug addiction. And I was living a very difficult life, but I was trying to survive. I was an orphan. I had nobody. I made some bad decisions. I had bad coping mechanisms. At one point, I had a boyfriend that forced me to do an abortion at 4 months pregnant. So, it was just really bad decisions that I made in my life, but I always kept God's center in my life. The problem is I had been through so many problems and I was always suffering so much that I was convinced that God did not love me, that he can love others, but he must not love me, or I'm destined to suffer. And because of that, my life seemed hopeless. So then when I'm 27 years old, after being on my own, dealing with custody battles, trying to take care of a child, God blesses me with my husband. And my husband ends up being a wonderful husband, the best husband that anyone can imagine. And I think it's because God needed me to understand and to experience unconditional love for someone like me with what I'm putting him through. Then if that's so, God must love me.
Right.
And if God must love me, I must not be that bad. I shouldn't hate myself. Then I learned to love myself. I learned to love myself by forgiving myself, by letting go, by forgiving others, by turning my life around, by doing the right thing. And just once I was able to feel loved, because I think that's something that we all have in common. We all need to feel loved. Then I could have changed my behavior and my coping mechanisms and the way that I did things so that I could be proud of myself, so that I can love myself, so that I can feel like I'm close to God and I have somebody on my side and life is not scary and I'm not so alone. Because I even remembered having it all, having a family, the home, the car, everything I ever wanted, but still feeling so lonely because life had become calm and I had forgotten to pray every day. I had forgotten to prioritize God. And then I realized, even if there's no problems going on, you can still be very sad.
Right.
when I was able to prioritize God and start every day with prayer and just always keep Him in mind. When you keep God in mind, you keep someone else in mind. And the best way to live life is by keeping someone else in mind. How can you help someone else? How can you do something better? How can you make a difference? And everything else just falls into place, because I realized that there were times that I felt when I was depressed that I could not handle the world and I wanted to die. And many times I was hoping the drugs would kill me.
Right.
But when you have God, everything changes. You don't feel like suffering is the end of the world. You feel like suffering is essential, and God will help you through it. And even if it feels like nothing's working and you can't pull yourself out of it, know that it will pass. Sometimes you just go to sleep and it wakes up and you wake up and it's better. And that God doesn't give you anything you can handle. Had I trusted God, many times I wouldn't have suffered.
When you say, let's go into, suffering is essential, because a lot of people, there are many, many different ways that people can view pain, and everyone is running around, even if they think they aren't, most everyone's running around trying to avoid pain. And what I try to get across to people and to myself is pain is unavoidable. It's not avoiding it. It's accepting that it's there. It's part of life.
Well, instead of focusing on the problem, think of a solution. Instead of looking at the negative, believe it or not, there's always a positive side to everything. Because just the same way you can find the skeletons in the closet, you can find something good about everything. Or at least this. Oh, this is going wrong, but at least this. Or at least I did that. Or, just focus on the good things.
So little things. Well, I know when someone's suffering from, chronic depression, that's part of what the illness does to you. It takes away your ability to see anything good. So how did you get through those times?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of it is society. They want us to believe that if something horrible happens to us, we're broken, or it's going to affect us for the rest of our life, or we're scarred for the rest of our life. You're only broken if you're dead. As long as you're alive, you have many opportunities to make things right. So then here I think, okay, I know better. I know how to think positive and everything, but what's wrong with me? I'm always thinking negative. I think of the wrong thing first. I'm thinking to myself, is it me that's broken? Well, that's what psychiatrists say. Because of your past, you should be. Or is it pickpocket, the enemy, the one who steals your soul without you even knowing he's stealing it? Or is it pickpocket, putting the negative thought in my mind first, or the negative idea in my mind first, to give me an opportunity to fight that temptation, to do the right thing regardless? Because if God was there first showing you the way, there'd be no reason for faith and there'd be no reason to make a choice. So then it was no longer me the problem, but pickpocket getting in the way. And guess what? God is in my team. And if God is for you, who can be against you? You're on the winning team.
How do you, or what is your relationship like now with your family, especially the people who were against you when you were going through what Miami media dubbed the case from hell?
My family is, of course, my immediate family, and those family members I picked up along the way.
Right.
My
family
best
we
friend,
create. Yes.
I consider the people that I work with a family, but my big family that I came from, I only speak to one sister. And every once in a while, another out of the 9.
Do you, and I ask this not because I'm judging it at all, because I have the same experience that you're talking about. I don't have any contact with my family for various reasons, but was there a period where, and I'm sure there was, but how long was it for you to mourn the fact that you just didn't have the mother or the father or the siblings or family that you deserved to have, that everyone deserves to have? Because there's always a mourning period. And then where are you today with that? Do you still have moments, or are you at a place where you really have peace about it?
Well, I'd like to say my mama raised me well. I've been praying rosary since I was a little girl. And when I was 15, I realized I was alone, and I made a pact with God and the Virgin Mary. I said, guys, you're it. You're my only parents, and I have no other choice but you. So I clung on to them as my parents. But sure, I missed having a mother. There were times I wanted advice with my daughter, or I wanted someone to hold me. There were many times that were lonely.
Right.
I was alone from 15 to 27. But once I married, my husband became my everything. And that, with God, was enough. It was when I stopped praying that I realized my husband wasn't everything. You know, and I realized that, you know, it's wonderful to have a husband like mine.
Yes, it is. And it's also, it also can be tricky when you're a sexual abuse survivor as a child, because a lot of us will go looking for a replacement parent. And sometimes it's of one or both parents that were really unhealthy. So that can be a tricky, a tricky walk, as I'm sure you experience in other relationships.
Yes, everything can be a tricky walk because see, Pickpeck was smart. My husband used to be perfect. He's not perfect anymore. Aha. Right. Now that's because I don't need perfect anymore. Now right. I can help him.
Right. I know, it's interesting. It's interesting how we grow and change in our ways. Someone will say to me, well, I had some, sexual abuse when I was a kid, and, therapy didn't work for me. And, you just need to stop crying about it, stop talking about it. And I've heard that so many times from people that are really closed off and they haven't dealt with the trauma that they went through. And I used to become offended or hurt. And now I can look at it and go, I hope that they get there. I hope that they get to that place where they don't just pass it off as a nothing experience. There is deep, there are gifts in exploring those wounds and healing them.
Well, God is not only enough, He gives purpose. Sometimes life, I know when I was depressed, life felt hopeless.
Right.
I did not see a reason for the fact that I was born. I couldn't stand my existence. It's so different. And even today, sometimes you go about your life and it seems monotone and you think, oh, I'm doing the right thing and I'm giving it my best shot, but nobody is noticing. Well, guess what? God's noticing. He's always there. He's not only your best friend and your father, but He knows you better than you know yourself.
I think too, it's when you grow up around that kind of trauma, you do become addicted to the adrenaline, to everything that's going on in your body from having to cope with that kind of trauma. And you can go through a period in your life where when things get too settled and stable and quote unquote boring, some things like depression can creep in during those times, because you just are not, you have no concept of what that kind of life is like to just have peace.
Well, I'm very grateful that I've had peace since I realized God is enough. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that every day is peaceful.
Right.
Sometimes you look at the sky and you appreciate the sky and you appreciate everything about it. And now I just don't appreciate that I'm not too depressed to do my daily activities.
Right.
But I'm thankful that when I'm sweeping, I can actually see the dirt and appreciate the dirt that I'm picking up, and that I have able legs to walk with to do so now that I have arthritis in the feet. And so I'm grateful for the times I'm able to. And so I've been able to live life with a grateful attitude. But there are days that sometimes you're like, oh, what is this about? And am I doing the right thing? And am I really? And then sometimes, because pickpocket does that, he gets you to question yourself. But don't worry, God will play a song you needed to hear, or your dog will be super loving, or you'll see God in a little kid that makes you smile. Something will happen, and sometimes it's just about patience. Sometimes I realize that patience and discipline is the name of the game.
Yeah, and gratitude, living in a space of gratitude. That is the key right there. Talk to my listeners about your book.
Well, my book is the advice I always gave my friends when they turned to me about their problems. I always said basically, and it was a cliche they used to make fun of me about. It ended up being my title. Love is the answer. God is the cure. Well, love is the answer. Treat it with love. You want it to get better? Pray. God is the cure. So in my life, when it came to all my problems and my depression and my PTSD, my husband's unconditional love and God's unconditional love and my unconditional love for my children was the answer to my problems. It's what corrected my ways and straightened my path. But the only thing that was able to heal the hurt was knowing that God loved me.
Well, can you tell my listeners where they can find out more about you?
AimesPurpose.com. And there they can see previous podcasts of radio shows and other things as well about the book and a little bit about my life. And they can contact me and they can leave reviews or give me suggestions and stuff like that. That would be great.
Awesome. And I want to make sure everybody how to spell Aimee. So if you go, it's The Cure with Aimee Cabo, and it's AIMEE CABO. So if you go to AimieCabo.com with that spelling, you'll find out everything that she's doing. And I'm so glad that you guys decided to join us on our network.
It's my pleasure. I feel very blessed every opportunity I get.
Yeah. Well, you're delightful to work with. I can vouch for that for sure.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of Mental Health News Radio.
Aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial.